Hi, I'm Jeff Luttrell. I own San Francisco Guitar Works and Sonoma County Guitar Works, and I've been really happy to collaborate with MusicNomad on developing the perfect system for addressing fret sprout on your guitar. It's a very common issue that we see. Guitars come in where you can feel the frets rough on the edge of the fretboard, and it's never fun to play a guitar that has rough edges on the frets. In my 20 years of fretwork experience, I've encountered every kind of fret problem imaginable, fret sprout on every type of guitar. So working together with MusicNomad, we've been able to develop the perfect set of tools to allow you to be able to address fret sprout on your guitar at home. So what is fret sprout, you might be asking? So fret sprout happens when the fingerboard shrinks and the frets do not. So if a guitar spends a lot of time in a climate that is less humid than the climate where it was built, the fingerboard will shrink. The common factor with fret sprout is that you can feel roughness along the edge of the fretboard. So you might feel the fret tangs sticking out the edge of the fretboard wood. You might feel the fret crowns hanging out over the binding if it's a bound board. It's going to show up in a slightly different way depending on the construction of the instrument and the type of finish on the fretboard. But I'm going to show you 4 different examples of how it might look on your guitar. So people ask me all the time, if I have fret sprout, can I just humidify my instrument and make the fretboard go back to where it was? It doesn't really work like that. The wood won't ever go back all the way to where it started. So the benefit of addressing fret sprout when the neck has reached its smallest dimension is that you bevel the frets in, you level them to the edge of the fretboard. If the wood humidifies and expands a little bit, now the fret ends are just a tiny bit inset and you'll never have a problem with fret sprout again. Here's the first most common scenario you're going to find when you have fret sprout. This bass neck is an unfinished fingerboard. It's rosewood, and it has exposed fret tangs. Now I can feel these fret tangs sticking out of the wood. Just they're sharp little corners on the bottom, and then I can also feel the corners of the fret crown protruding over the edge of the fretboard. So this is very typical if you have a rosewood fretboard, Stratocaster, Tele, P-Bass, J-Bass, any number of guitars that have rosewood or even maple boards that have exposed fret tangs. This is what you're gonna find. So this Stratocaster is a little bit different. This has a finished neck. So the frets were put into the fretboard, they were beveled, and then the entire neck was coated with polyurethane. So on this one, you can feel the fret ends poking out, but they're all covered with finish. So this is a little bit different as far as the approach on this. There's some finish concerns. If it gets scratched up, it will have to be polished out after we do the beveling and the leveling of the fret tangs. There's also a couple of spots on here where the finish has been pushed loose off of the fretboard by the fret ends. So that's something that you're going to want to be aware of. If you run into any finish chipping because of the finish not being adhered around the fret, you would need to take that to a shop and have that addressed by a professional. Another type of fret end treatment is to inset the frets in the fretboard and then put putty in the ends of the fret slots so that it looks almost like the fretboard is bound. This Yamaha has that technique. So it has the fret sprout is not actually the fret tang sticking out. It's actually the putty getting pushed out of the fret slots. So it feels bumpy. It's not catchy, but it definitely feels bumpy and you can feel it pushing out of the board. Also, you can feel the fret crown starting to push just a little bit over the edge of the fretboard. So this one, to fix this fret sprout, you would actually be beveling down the putty on the fretboard and then beveling in the top of the fret crown. Yet another example of fret sprout, or what happens when the fingerboard shrinks and the frets do not, is this Gibson Les Paul. This guitar was constructed, the fingerboard was made, the fingerboard was fretted, the frets were beveled straight, and then the binding was put on. That gets glued on to the neck shaft. Now the fingerboard has shrunk, and what has happened is the binding is cracking at every fret position. So you can see that as the fingerboard shrunk and the frets did not, it started putting pressure on the binding and it started cracking all along the binding. You can feel it. It's a little bit of a bumpiness on every fret point. but there's really nothing you can do about this. You would have to go through the finish and actually level down the binding, and you would have no finish at every point where the frets are, and it's just not worth doing. It doesn't feel that bad. But this is another example of what happens when the fingerboard shrinks and the frets do not. So now I'm going to take you through the entire process of repairing fret sprout on this bass neck. The first thing that you're going to want to do is remove the strings from your instrument. You're going to use a block on top of the frets, so you can't have strings on the instrument because they'll just be in the way of the block. So if you have a bolt neck guitar, taking the neck off will make the job a little bit easier. But whatever type of instrument you have, whether it's an acoustic guitar, a bass, electric guitar, the process is going to be the same. For using all the types of tools will be the same, and the method will be the same no matter what the instrument. So now let's talk a little bit about the tools that you'll need. MusicNomad has designed a system for fixing fret sprout that is really like no other. So the first tool that we'll use is called a B file. This is a beveling file. It's used to bevel the fret crowns and to bring the fret tangs in to the level of the fretboard. The next tool that I'll use is the E file. This is a diamond coated fret end dressing file. This will be used to round the edges of the fret crown where the crown transitions into the bevel. So that's what this will soften that corner and get it ready for final polishing. The last tool that we'll use is the tracer fret eraser system. This has two handles, one handle that is used for polishing your fret tops after you have crowned them, and the second flat block that is used for polishing the sides of the bevels, and then the softer side that's actually used for polishing the rounded transition between the crown and the bevel. It comes with 4 different grits of micro mesh and will bring the fret ends to a mirror shine after you've beveled and rounded them. So this bass neck is ready for the beveling process. As you can see, this neck happens to have no nut or tuners. If you can remove the nut from your neck easily, it's nice to have it out of the way. If you cannot, you just want to make sure that you don't hit it hard with the B file because you could chip it, or you could even chip the back of the nut shelf. So the first thing that I'm going to do when addressing this fret sprout is I'm going to bring the tangs of the frets in to the edge of the fretboard. So to do that, I'm going to use the 3-degree bevel on the B file. So I need to move my file from the 23-degree side to the 3-degree side. Now I have a double cut and a single cut. I'm going to use the single cut file for this because these frets are not sticking out terribly far, so I don't want to have a rough cut that I need to polish out at the end. So I'm going to take this file, drop it into the 3-degree file side. The double cut side is really handy if you have frets that are sticking out quite a ways from the edge of the fretboard and you have a lot of material to remove. Also, it's really good for use on stainless frets because the stainless is harder to cut. So the single cut, although it does leave a nice fine finish, it does take longer to bring the frets in just due to the hardness of the stainless frets. So I have my file in my 3-degree slot. So now the B file is going to just sit down on to the fret tops. So the B file, when it's used in this orientation, is going to file the fret tangs and file those down level with the fretboard. So I'll put my B file onto the fret tops. Now the file, you can see, is laying right on the fret tangs. You want to make sure that you have enough file sticking out of the block that it covers the fret tangs completely. So you go down and you just take a look, make sure that your file is fully covering the fret tangs. Before you start filing, you want to bring the file all the way to the end of the fretboard and make sure that the file isn't going to hit the headstock or a tuner or something like that. And then you're also, especially if you have a set neck guitar or an acoustic guitar, you're going to want to bring the file all the way down over the body and look and see that there is adequate clearance between the file and the top of the guitar. Because the last thing that anyone wants is to come down with the file to the end of the neck and have the file scratch the top of the guitar. So just be sure that whenever you have the file over the body, you have clearance for the file. One of the many benefits of the B file is that we actually took that into consideration when the file was designed, and we've given adequate slot depth so that you can recess the file enough to clear just about any guitar body that you'll find. So anytime you're bringing a material down to the level of another surface, you're going to hit that surface. So whenever you're truing the fret ends and bringing them into the side of the fretboard, if you have a guitar that has finish, the file is just gonna hit the finish. I mean, there's no way around it. The only way to make them level all the way down to the finish is to skate the file on the finish. And also the fingerboard may not be perfectly true. It may have some little humps or dips, and so there might be areas where the file hits the finish. You just need to be careful, go slow and steady, and just pay attention. If you see the finish starting to get a little bit scuffed, you know that that's as far as you're going to go on that. You don't want to keep going because you will blow through the finish. The few scuffs you might end up with can be removed with the tracer fret eraser micro mesh. So now I'm going to get into actually filing in the fret tangs. So you can hold the guitar any way that's comfortable for you. I like to lay, whether it's a guitar with a body or whether it is just a neck, I like to hold the guitar at the headstock and hold the neck up at an angle. Some people do it with the neck flat. I like being able to push the file into the fret ends, with gravity, and also I can see what's happening as I file when the neck is up at an angle like this. When it's down like this, you really have a hard time actually seeing what the file's doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get started, and I'm going to start back here at the heel, and I'm just going to take a light stroke with the file all the way up. Now you can hear in the center, it doesn't sound like it's cutting, and that's because the fret tangs in the middle really don't have that much fret sprout. The ones on the ends, for some reason, are worse. So you can hear the difference as it cuts. So I'm going to stay off of the middle. It's already where I want it. So I'm going to come up to the end and just bevel, bring in that fret tang until I feel the file cut reducing. I can feel that. That feels nice and level. I'm going to come down here to the heel, do the same thing. And you'll be able to hear whenever the file gets to the finish or gets to the wood. The cut sounds very different. The amount of metal to metal noise that you'll hear really decreases, and you can feel that the file starts skating on the finish rather than cutting the frets. All right, now I can just feel the file is just skating along on the wood. It's not hitting the frets anymore. So I've got these down and level with the edge of the fretboard. So they feel very smooth. They look rough, but that's because the file will polish all that out. If you have a fretboard that is perfectly 90 degrees, the 3-degree bevel might leave a tiny bit of the bottom of the tang sticking out. Now we did that on purpose because if you have a 90-degree bevel, often you'll have a fretboard that's rounded on the side and that file will dig into the fretboard. So we definitely do not want that to happen. The 3-degree bevel works really well for bringing the fret tangs into 95% of fretboards out there. If you do have a fretboard that's exactly 90 degrees up and down, you may find the very bottom of the fret tang is still protruding. All you would do to remedy that is you would just pick up the file just a little bit off of the fretboard and change the angle slightly, and then you'll be able to catch that very bottom of the fret tang like I did there on the upper part of the neck. I can feel just a tiny bit of the tang sticking out, but it's very easy to fix. You just take your file again and just raise it up just a bit, and you'll be able to catch the bottom of that fret tang. So now I have the fret tangs in, and I'm going to go ahead and move my file over to the 23-degree angle slot, and I'm going to bevel the actual fret crown. Because what I have after I brought in the fret tangs, I have a very flat fret on the side. It almost goes just straight up to the top of the crown. There's no bevel angle on most of these frets. So let me switch this over. So now I have this moved over to the 23-degree side, and I'm going to bevel the fret crowns into the fretboard. Now you might have noticed whenever I was bringing in the fret tangs, I had to do more work on the ends than I did in the middle. And in fact, I skipped a small section in the middle. You know, you're going to encounter all kinds of different scenarios. You may have a guitar where the frets only stick out, you know, in the low registers. It may be only on the treble side. You know, it could be anything. So you just want to address the issues as they happen. If you have a lot of fret tangs sticking out, you're going to have to do more filing. If they're very close to the edge of the fretboard as it is, you're not going to have to do as much. So just, you know, be careful, pay attention to what's happening, and you'll do fine. So now with using the same type of technique, I like to hold, again, you know, the fretboard up at an angle, and I'm going to go ahead and put my file down on the fret ends. Now, one thing that you want to remember with the, especially when you're using the 23-degree file, you don't want to jump up off the fret side and then score your fret tops. You know, you may have just leveled your frets, but at any rate, you don't want to ever file the tops of the frets. Yeah, so just be careful as you're filing this way, you keep your pressure into the fretboard. And so you don't jump the file up and skate across the frets. So if you, with the safed file edges, if you do happen to jump up off the fret ends and onto the fret tops, you have less of a chance of really gouging them. If you just use a hardware store file, they have a lot of flashing on the corners and they will just wreck your fret tops. So this file is really the best file to use for this. Now, whenever you're cutting with the file, just remember the file only really cuts in one direction. The main direction of cut is going to be determined by the file orientation in the handle. So I have this set so that it cuts going forward. So I'm just going to put mine on the fret crown here, and I'm just going to file forward. And I can see right now what the bevel that it's putting on the fret tops. It's pretty apparent that it's cutting right along the top of the fret, and it's not even close to the fretboard yet. So I'm going to come in and just keep filing. Now you can do localized areas a little bit at a time. You can do the entire thing all at once. So my preference is to use full file strokes all the way up the neck, one stroke at a time. That tends to give the most even results. But you may find that you're taking more material out of one end or the other just because of the way you weight your hand as you're moving it. So if you notice you're taking more material out of these frets, you know, you may have to come down here and give a couple of extra strokes just to even everything out. You know, just pay attention and watch what's happening and adapt your technique to whatever guitar you're working on. So whenever you're orienting the file in the B file handle, an easy way to check to see which direction it's cutting is to just use your fingernail and run it along the file. It's gonna cut your nail both ways, but one way it kind of slides across the file and the other way it catches and doesn't want to move. So the opposite side of the file is a double cut file, and you would determine the tooth direction in exactly the same way. If you have big frets or stainless frets where you need to remove a lot of material, you might use the double cut first to bring it in close, and then use the single cut just to finish it out the rest of the way. So we'll put this in this position, and then I will just go down one stroke at a time. And I can definitely feel, you know, the file is cutting really heavily. There's a lot of material coming off here. One thing to be aware of is there is a tendency, I have this tendency myself, to finish the file stroke without really giving the last fret a good cut. So sometimes you have to come in and put a little extra pressure on that last fret and just give it a little cut to bring it into the rest of the frets. So I can see that I'm getting very close to down to the finger. Oh, and now I'm feeling that last stroke, I can feel it skate on the wood. So now I'm just going to very lightly put the file on the frets, and I can feel the ones that are still needing to be cut. So those are good through here. I'm feeling that it's just skating on the wood through there, but I still have a little bit more to go down here. All right, that's nice and smooth all along the fretboard. So I've got my frets into the edge of the wood. Everything feels nice and smooth. I can't feel any fret protruding from the edge of the fretboard. So now I'm going to switch my file back into the 3-degree bevel on the B file. I'm going to turn the neck around, and I'm going to bring in the fret tangs to the edge of the fretboard. Then I'll move my file to my 23-degree and bring my bevel into the edge of the fretboard, just like I did on the bass side. All right, so that looks good. Brought in the bevel all the way to the edge of the fretboard. Everything feels nice and smooth. So now I am ready to take my E file and round the transition between the crown and the bevel. So after you've done your beveling, you're going to end up with a very sharp corner on the end of the crown. And you want to round that over, so you don't want to have that sharp edge. So to do that, I'll use my E file, which is a diamond coated fret end dressing file. It has it's a nice handle. It's a nice rubber ergonomic handle. You can control it really well. It has a rounded side and a flat side. The flat side will enable you to get the file right down in the corner of the fret, so you can take off that little sharp corner. And then the rounded side will enable you to round over the fret crown without marring the fretboard. So it's a really great file. It's the right length, and the diamond grit leaves a real nice smooth finish that you can polish out really easily. So for using the E file, the result you're trying to get is you're just trying to break the corner between the crown and the bevel. You don't want to put a huge round over on it. You just want it soft enough that it doesn't feel catchy, but you don't want it so rounded that you wash out the transition between the crown and the bevel. So the way that I do that is I will hold the file. I use my right hand for both sides of the fret. I will hold the file in my right hand, and I'll put the flat side of the file down on the fretboard, and I'll give 2 strokes on the corner. And then I'll come from the other direction and give 2 strokes on the corner. And that's going to knock off the little corner at the very bottom of the fret crown where it sits on the fretboard. Then I'll flip the file over to the rounded side, put it in exactly the same spot, and then at about a 45-degree angle to the fret, I'm going to round the file up over the fret top 3 times. Then I'm going to come in from the left side, and I'm going to do the same thing. 1, 2, 3. After you've done that, you should be able to look at your fret and see a nice, even filed corner between the crown and the bevel. It should be very distinct between the two, and it shouldn't be overly filed. Now, that's just my technique. You know, I work with a lot of different people, and I know some other techs who will use their right hand for the right side of the fret. They'll use their left hand for the left side. I know some guys will do the right side from the top and then come in and do the left side from the bottom. So you can kind of try what works for you, but just the main things you're trying to achieve are not marring the fretboard. If you have a maple board and you gouge it with your file, you'll have finish work to do. So you don't want to have any marring on the fretboard. And then you also just want to make sure that you're having a nice even break on that corner. So whether you use left hand, right hand, coming from this side or this side, it's totally up to you. I just find that the way that I practiced it over the last couple of decades of just using my right hand from both sides works really well. So now I'm going to go through and dress the ends of each fret. So I'm going to start here on my second fret, come in on my flat side, Give a couple of strokes on the corner, couple of strokes on the corner, flip the file over. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm not using a lot of pressure. The file does most of the work. You don't have to be putting a lot of weight on it. And I can look at this and I can see a nice even corner between the bevel and the crown. So if this was a set neck guitar or an acoustic, or you had left the neck on your instrument for any reason, you want to be very careful with the end of your file that you don't scratch the top of the guitar. I would recommend, if you have the KISS setup tools, I would recommend taping one of the radius gauges on the top. It's a very thin metal. It will definitely keep you from dinging the guitar. If you don't have that, maybe a couple of pieces of masking tape just to warn you if you're getting too close, but that's really critical, is that you don't hit the end of the file on the guitar. Ta-da! So now that I have my fret ends all dressed with my E file, I'm going to use my second handle from my tracer fret eraser system to polish the flat spot on the bevel. What we're trying to accomplish with this first step is the bevel is going to have file marks on it. So when you look at the very end of the fret, the flat spot that you filed with the 23-degree angle, you're going to see that there are file marks. It's not going to be shiny and smooth. So what we're trying to do here is polish out all those file marks and leave a really smooth mirror edge on the bevel. So to do that, I'm going to use, with my second handle from the tracer fret eraser, I'm going to use the hard plastic side of that. And I'm going to start with the number 2 micro mesh sheet. The number 2 is typically a great place to start. It'll take out all the file scratches. If you find you have 1 or 2 that are a little bit deeper, it does come with 4 sheets of micro mesh, so there is a number 1 available if you need something a little more coarse. I usually start with the number 2. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to eyeball my angle here to sand out the file marks on the edge of the fret bevel. So when I'm using this handle to polish the bevels on my frets, I like to have it at an angle to the frets, and that presents a rounded leading edge to the frets so that I don't inadvertently snag the micro mesh. So I'll hold it at a bit of an angle. The angle that you need to polish out the bevel is 23 degrees, just like the block, but you don't have any gauge to hold it in that angle. So what I would recommend is do a little bit of, try to get it by eye, just kind of hold it right about the right angle. And then what you can do is just do a couple of light strokes and you can see where it's polishing the fret. So right there, I can see that I'm polishing the entire fret bevel. If I was holding it at too steep of an angle, I would see that it was only hitting the bottom of the fret crown. So you're gonna have to do a little bit of experimenting, but if you keep an eye on your fret ends, you'll be able to see that you are holding it at the right angle for the bevel. So as you do this, just like with the file, you're gonna be hitting the fretboard a little bit, in between the frets. But the micro mesh is so fine, you're not gonna damage your fretboard. It's just not going to take off enough material to hurt anything. And once you go up through the number 4 polishing pad with the micro mesh, it's going to be completely shiny and look beautiful. So I'll go ahead and come in here and do my bevels. And I'm just looking at each bevel and I'm seeing, sometimes, you need to get the light at a certain angle so you can see the ends. But I'm coming in here and I can see, got a couple of little file marks up here on my first 2 frets. I'm going to just get on those a little bit. Okay, took those right out. And I'm coming down here. I'm just watching my bevel, making sure that I'm getting a nice smooth finish on every one of them. And then I can come down onto the fret tangs and just make sure that those are nice and smooth as well. So I can bring that right down the neck and just make sure that everything is nice and shiny. That looks good. All my fret file marks are out. So now I'll move over to my number 3 pad. So now the same thing. I'm just going to come in here at a bit of an angle, the hard side of the block, polish up that. Looks good. These are already looking pretty fantastic. Just drop it down and hit the edge, make sure that the tangs are nice and shiny. Okay, now that I have my bevels all clean and polished with the number 3, I'm going to use the soft side or the black foam side of my handle to polish the roundovers that I did with the E-file. You can hold the handle upright long ways and then just move it up and down the bevels like so. And this is going to just polish those roundovers out perfectly. These things are just gleaming now. So that's how you polish the roundover that you did with the E-file. So now for my number 4 grit, for my final polishing stage, I'm going to go back to the hard side of the handle and I'm going to hit the bevels again. And this is just final polishing. This is just the finishing touch. Then I'll go back over to the soft side of the handle to do my roundovers. Now this, the foam was specially selected to be the right density to allow the micro mesh to really conform to the roundover between the crown and the bevel. So this really gets down in the corners and it just conforms to the fret top and leaves an amazing finish on the bevel and on the crown. So that is it. And those are gorgeous fret ends. They are completely mirror shine. There's absolutely no fret sprout. The roundover on the fret top is it's defined, but it's yet very smooth. So you have maximum playing surface on the fret, but you also have a nice, comfortable feel on the fret tops. So, this is absolutely top shop standard right here. Just beautiful fret ends. In your polishing process, if you are using a guitar where the neck is still attached to the body, you will need to address the holding of the handle a little bit differently. So when you're polishing the fret ends that are over the body of a set neck guitar or an acoustic guitar, what I like to do is I'll have my fingers on the backside and that I can rest those on the frets as I do my polishing, and that keeps the pad from dropping down onto the guitar body. So you can do that for your bevels, and then you can do the same thing for the fret ends. Just hold the pad in a way that your finger can kind of stay up on the fret tops, and you'll be able to polish those out without any danger of running into the finish on the guitar top. So I hope that you've seen that fret sprout is a condition that you can fix. Having the right tools is going to make your job a lot easier. I mean, you could go out in the garage and find an old file in the toolbox and some random sandpaper and try to do it that way. But really having a well thought out series of tools and a good method to make it happen is just going to make your life a lot easier. I take a lot of pride in the fret work that I do at my shop, and I would absolutely send this out to any of our customers. I mean, these fret ends are beautiful, and I didn't do it in any different way than you will. So I've been doing it a lot longer, but these tools make it really easy for you to tackle this job with confidence, knowing that you're going to get a pro level result. So now I'm going to show you how I would take care of the fret sprout on a guitar with a finished fretboard, because I know there's a lot of concern around finish and what's going to happen if I accidentally hit my finish. You are going to hit your finish, so I'm going to show you that it's not the end of the world. I'm going to go ahead and use my B file to first bring down the fret tangs. These are not sticking out terribly far, but I can definitely feel them. So I'll bring down the fret tangs, then I'll bring in the bevel using the 23-degree angle side of the B file. A couple of concerns that I have on this guitar that I did not on the bass neck that you saw is I'm going to leave this on the body. I'm also going to leave the nut in, and I'm going to have to work around both of those things, but it's a good example of what you'll need to do if you have a guitar where the neck will not come off. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put my file in my 3-degree side. So with this in the 3-degree side, I'm going to flip the guitar around because I'm going to be addressing the treble side. The bass side on this guitar is fine. So I'm going to just only do the treble side. And first thing I want to do is I want to see, is this file going to hit anything? So I'm going to take it and put it lightly on the fretboard and move it forward. And sure enough, it is going to hit the pickup. So I could be just very careful and not hit the pickup, but it's very easy to lower a pickup. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop this pickup down out of the way. So now I have clearance on my pickup, and I've got plenty of clearance on my body. And now I'm going to move down here to the nut end and just make sure I'm not going to hit anything. I certainly will hit the nut, but I am in no danger of the file hitting the headstock or anything else. So now I'm just going to very lightly run my file down the fretboard. I can feel it just barely cutting those tangs. It isn't going to need much on this one. It's very, very slight. And I can see that I have scuffed my finish. But I'm going to be able to fix that. So just one more little run down here to make sure that I've got all my fret ends. So that feels very, very smooth. So now I've brought the fret tangs in to the level of the fingerboard. Now I'm feeling the edge of these frets, and the fret crowns really are not sticking out beyond the fretboard. There's no catching. There's no sharp corners, nothing's grabbing. It was just the tangs. So I'm not going to use the 23-degree slot on the B file to bevel these. They just don't need it. And I'm also not going to use the E file to round the transition because it's already very comfortable and very soft. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my second handle in my tracer fret eraser kit to do my polish along the fret tangs. And I'm also going to use it to polish the existing bevel and end treatment. So the fret tangs will now be down flush with the edge of the fretboard, and the fret ends will be freshly polished. They'll look mirror shiny, and everything will be soft and smooth. But they're just not grabby. You don't need to do any additional work. We just needed to bring in those fret tangs. So I'm going to put on my number 2 micro mesh loop. So just like this guitar had only the fret tang sticking out, you may have a guitar with binding that has only the fret crown sticking out. So you may have to use, just the 3-degree or just the 23-degree. Maybe you have frets that are not sticking out past the fretboard, but are just sharp. The corners are catchy. The ends aren't rounded well. So maybe you would just use the E file and round those over and then polish them. So that's the great thing about the kit, is that you have many options because there's many different types of guitars, many different types of scenarios. But for any type of fret end problem or treatment, polishing, rounding, the MusicNomad fret sprout kit is going to cover any need that you have. So using my handle with the hard side down and the number 2 pad, I'm coming in and I'm just polishing the fret tangs, and I'm making sure that I take out any little scuff that I got on the finish from the B file. And it's just coming right out. I can see that it's just removing that slight bit of scuffing that I got on the finish. To give it a little bit of elbow grease to get that all the way out. But the micro mesh is so fine that unless you have an extremely thin finish, you do not have to worry about blowing through your finish or having any issues with finish removal. So now I've gotten through my number 2. So now with my number 3 pad and the hard side down, I'm going to come in and polish out the edge of the fret tangs. Make sure that I'm hitting any area that got hit with the number 2. Already this is looking nice and shiny. And as I stated, I'm going to go ahead and hit the bevels of the frets and just go ahead and clean those up, just polish them out while I'm in here. Here's an instance of using the handle above the body. I just have my fingers on the back side just to keep it from going down and touching the body of the guitar. Polishing those all out. Now I'm going to flip it around and I'm going to come in with the soft side and I'm going to go ahead and just hit these hit the bevels and the round over. And again, just make sure that I'm not going to hit the body. It's all polished out. And this soft foam really works great. I mean, it conforms exactly to the frets and really leaves a beautiful shine on the end. So now lastly, using my number 4 polisher, come in on the edge with the hard side. Able to just polish that all out. And I don't have to really worry too much about pressure or overworking it because the 4th stage of the micro mesh is really just a polisher. It doesn't take really any material. So now I'm coming up on the fret ends with the flat part, the hard side of the block, polishing out the bevel, making sure I don't hit the body. And now lastly, I will use the soft foam side with the number 4 and just get those ends nice and shiny. All right, so that was a finished fingerboard, bringing in the fret tangs. I did scuff the finish a little bit, but I was able to polish it out. It looks factory smooth. And the fret ends now are extremely shiny. Like I said, they were already soft enough that I didn't feel like I needed to do any additional work to them, but they just have that little extra bit of gleam that you want to see whenever you finish any kind of fret work. So I've seen a bunch of videos out on the internet about how to do this type of work. And, I really take a lot of pride in my fret work, and I work on a lot of vintage instruments. I work on a lot of instruments that are just have a lot of sentimental value. But, our main thing is that we don't ever want to do any harm. And the MusicNomad Fret Sprout Toolkit really minimizes the chance that you're going to have any damage to your instrument. It's important to me that you have success whenever you do this job. And I feel like these tools and techniques are really going to give you the best chance of executing a pro level fret end treatment the first time you try it.
For more videos on how to perform guitar setups or care for your frets, subscribe to our channel and visit musicnomadcare.com for all our products and how-to videos.